Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for being on this webinar. I really appreciate it. I really value your wisdom as a teacher. We don't actually know each other that well, but everything I know of you and see of your work, I really appreciate. So thank you for sort of being on this webinar with us. This new series we're doing for people that hopefully are going to reach the people that we work with in prison at the moment, as we're not allowed to be in there. So before we go any further, can you introduce yourself and just tell everybody who you are for those of people who don't know you, and also the work you do and how you came to do the work you're doing, just so we can get a sense of you. That would be really helpful.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to do this. I'm really super encouraged about all the work that you've been doing in the prisons. And I noticed on the international conference that we did, one of the guys that had gone through your program was like a plant in Kathy Casey's talk.
Michael,
and, yeah, Michael, and he was so articulate, and you could see how much you'd helped him. And I know that Sid Banks, who was the person that kind of discovered the principles, always had such a warm place in his heart for people who are incarcerated or were down and out for whatever reason. And I know that he'd be really so happy about what you're doing and the kind of work.
I really appreciate that.
I'm happy to get to know you also.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. No, Michael's, it was fun that he was on Kathy's webinar. I heard about that. I didn't actually see it, but I went back to watch it because I heard that he was on there. He watched a lot of them. Yeah.
I was watching it, and I was like, I texted her and I said, "Oh, nice plant." It was really nice, so very, very nice. And that, to me, the hope that I've seen over my career. And when I first learned this, it was 1980. So I was about 14. No, that was a joke. But I had been working in the mental health field and in the what we call community corrections and in the addiction field for about 6 years. And I was totally burned out as a result of that. And I was, in my mind, thinking the reason I was so unhappy was because I couldn't find anybody that would marry me. And so I was talking to Joe Bailey, who is another Three Principles practitioner, and he was telling me about this conference that this guy that he went to listen to in Florida speak. And he had about 3 sentences to say about the talk that Sydney Banks had. And then he talked for several hours about the woman that he met there. And he had met his current wife at this conference. And so he was talking about that. So I was like totally into the feeling he had about his wife. And I was thinking like, oh yeah, maybe I should start going to psychology conferences to meet a husband rather than bars. I don't know, I kept finding alcoholics in bars, so it wasn't working out. But I was really disenchanted with the work that I was doing and the work that my colleagues were doing. I mean, I was looking around and I thought, nobody else is getting any better results than I am. And people would get better just because I loved them. I really think that's, I just really cared about them, and I would focus on them as being strong and healthy as much as possible, but I didn't know much about it. So when I was going to get out of the field, basically, because I thought that it was a bunch of crap and it wasn't helping people. And I'd work with people, and then they'd relapse and they'd go back to whatever their problem was, whether it was a mental health problem or a relationship problem or addiction or whatever it was. So I went to this training and I totally changed. I mean, I just had such a deep insight that I have to tell you, it had nothing to do with me. I did not do anything to make this happen to me. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for a husband. I was looking for love in all the wrong places, right? So I wasn't really interested. It was a male psychologist at the time. I was a feminist therapist. I was like, he's got nothing to tell me about anything. And I was quite arrogant, insecure, and stressed. And I got hit so hard with the illusion that thought creates, that the outside world was creating my distress. And I just cracked up laughing because I realized I'd spent about $25,000 and about 7 years in therapy analyzing what I'd made up. So this was hilarious to me. I thought this was funny. And then when I saw it was just my thinking, I was like, oh my God, I'm thinking this. And you know how when people have that near-death experience and they say that their life flashes before their eyes? Well, to me, what flashed in front of my eyes was all of the things I thought wrong about. Like the misperceptions I'd created and didn't realize, where it's like, oh, that, oh, that, oh, that, oh, there is nothing wrong with me. And that was my saving grace. So I changed dramatically over a weekend. I mean, I changed so dramatically that people in the field thought that I had flipped out. I mean, I got calls from people saying, Chris, I heard that you flipped out. I said, well, if this is flipping out, you should try it because it's a lot nicer than I was. So my feeling changed so much, it scared people. They'd never seen this before. So they'd never seen a human being change that much. And so people thought I was on drugs, I'd met a man, or I had joined a cult. Because those are the only times people had ever seen people actually be happy for no reason. Mm. And, well, I don't know about happy with drugs, but different, it changed that much. So I thought I'd show you this a little bit because this is a great example of a change in a feeling, right? So this was my coffee cup. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This was a really good picture of me before I learned the principles, right? So this was my coffee cup, and I had it for a long time. And then when I started learning the principles and I got in a nicer feeling, somehow I got a new cup from my best friend at the time. And this was my new coffee cup. Now that's a change in a feeling, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what's possible for people. Now, I didn't even see this. I was drinking my coffee with this coffee cup, and one of my clients brought some flowers to me. And so I went in the cupboard and I found this. It was the only thing big enough to put flowers in. And so I put it out and I was talking about how your feeling changes. And I said, oh, let me show you. This is a great example of what that is.
That is a great example. That's
yeah.
Great visual.
So as a result of that, I changed my career. I had the same career, but I changed it, right? And so now my career was teaching people how to have a shift like that and how to live in a better feeling. And I have worked with people who are incarcerated. As I said, I got my undergraduate degree in women's correction. So I set up halfway houses. I worked with the Minnesota Prisoners Union. I tried to set up the Minnesota Prisoners Union at the time. And I did all kinds of things trying to help people, because that was really what I just wanted to help the world in some way. So when I learned the principles, that shift just brought me up to where everybody else was. I think, I was in such a low level of consciousness. I was so stressed. And so it's like life grabbed me by the collar and yanked me up and said, hey, you got to teach this. And so I've been teaching the principles ever since, and I do mostly outpatient work. That's what I've done, but have done lots of programs in the schools, in marriage and family therapy. I wrote a book called The Secret of Love, Unlocking the Mystery and Unleashing the Magic with Lori Carpinos. And I have a clinic in Hawaii and offices on the Big Island as well as on Oahu. And right now we're offering free counseling to people. We have interns that we can see online. Oh, cool. And we also have are covered by insurance for a lot of our licensed people. So we are trying to do our best to help the situation with the virus.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. We do outpatient substance abuse. I work with addictions. I've worked with all kinds of addictions, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I'm licensed in Minnesota and in Hawaii.
Nice, cool. So what it feels like to me, just listening to your story, is that there's, and especially looking at those coffee cups too, it's like emotional freedom. There was some kind of like real tight kind of like, I don't know, experience you were going through, and you saw something there and it felt like emotional freedom. And it's so interesting at the moment, here we all are like locked down in our houses, and the population that we work with, in that state all the time, without the freedom to go anywhere and do anything. And so, and I kind of when I'm feeling a little, claustrophobic, I think of people who don't have that freedom to choose which room they go to or have a house to do whatever. And so I'm just curious, what is it, having emotional freedom for you? How do you feel that helps with people that you work with in addictions or in corrections? What is that, how have you seen that what you learned or what you saw for yourself, and how that changed in the clientele you were working with?
Well, I think that when you don't know that your thoughts are creating what you're feeling emotionally, it feels like the world's got you by the throat. And, that kind of whips you around and throws you around and knocks you back and forth. And so you're like one step behind always, like life is happening and you're in a reaction to what you're seeing. So getting that shift, at least for me, helped me to see how to stay balanced as I walk through trouble in the world, as I walk through other people's insecurity, as I walk through my life in general, that I wasn't any more controlled by the outside world. Like I got really mad about people trying to control me in the outside world, because I didn't understand how it worked for me. And I felt like I was at the effect of what other people were doing and their bad choices and, bad things that happen. It's like we all have people that we run into in life who are not in a very good state of mind and do silly things or do hurtful things or do really awful things. And understanding that people are like that, but that's not about me, allows me to focus on me and not them. And to me, that's the freedom, is that I have the ability to be happy no matter what. Now, I didn't know that before. I thought happiness was contingent on being married, being successful, being thin, being liked. Like those were the things that to me, I needed to have in my life to be okay. And I was, so insecure that I said all those things that never happened. It was like if I met a nice guy who was nice to me, I'd break up with him, because I think, what kind of a guy are you that you'd want to be with me? There is no winning. There's just no winning when you don't know that you're creating your emotional experience. But when you are, whatever happens, you get through it. You walk through it. You understand. You feel bad about it, but you're not going to stay there forever. Like, you don't have to give up your power to people just because that's what always has been, or that's the way you've been. Like, change is possible for everybody. And my mother told me, she said, you tell your clients, honey, that if this can work for you, it can work for anybody.
Full of confidence there.
Yeah.
That's good. And just, you were just saying there that you're going to get through something, that how do you know, when we're spending a lot of time focused on, believing everything we think is real, and our experience is coming from the outside, it really doesn't feel like we're going to be okay. And there's something you just said of that, well, I'm thinking something, I'm feeling something, it's going to pass, and I know I'm going to be okay. Like, how do you know that? Like, what does that look like for you when you're thinking kind of quieting down, or you saw how experience was being created, that you no longer, you started to see something else, you started to see that you're okay regardless? Where did that come from?
Well, it just came from understanding that I was just thinking, and that how I felt when it wasn't good was coming from my own thinking, not from the outside world. So if you see that your natural state of mind is to be in a beautiful feeling, like whatever that is, it might be secure, it might be happy, it might be love, it might be like self-confidence, but that feeling state is what we are. And then we think. And whatever we're thinking either goes along with that and makes it even more beautiful, or it makes it more negative. So if I know that's what I am, as long as I'm alive, I have that feeling inside of me.
Hmm.
And so it doesn't matter, like, you know, like right now, my husband has all the risk factors for the coronavirus. And so we had to start like really isolating ourselves a month ago. I saw it coming. My wisdom told me this is going to kill your husband if he gets it. You've got to start now. And I just listened to that, and I was a good thing because we had to practice a lot because we weren't very good at paying attention. So is like seeing that, okay, this is what I have to do. So now we're here, and like I can tell when I watch TV too much, I start to lose my good feeling. So then I turn it off. And I just like let my good feeling come back. It doesn't mean that there's still not a problem. It doesn't mean like things are still crazy. Like one of the things I remember when I was working with people that were incarcerated was that frequently they'd be thinking a lot about how great it would be to be home. And it sounded like that was positive thinking on their part, but it really was creating their insecurity or their bad feeling because they weren't home. Right? So to me, understanding that my good feeling is inside of me, all I have to do is be present in the moment, and then I'll see how to get through whatever I have to get through in the moment. But if I'm thinking it should be different, if I'm living in the future, if I'm living in the past, I'm not present in the moment, and I'm not going to be feeling good.
Yeah. I know it's definitely, I've seen in so much in the people that we work with, that shift that, you know, that you know, you think that your misery and your shitty state of mind or your insecurity comes from the fact that you're in prison, or that, you know, that you're locked up and other people have control over you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And just in recognizing that feeling changes, you know, that it's not always true, that they sometimes see it differently, and that they start to see that it actually that there's freedom in understanding that their mind changes, and sometimes they actually feel, you know, at peace inside, and sometimes they feel, you know, insecure, and sometimes they feel like in the flow of life, and start to recognize that their surroundings don't have, you know, aren't dictating their happiness. There's something fundamental that starts to shift, because it takes it's like taking the power back or something. You know, you think that if we think that the outside world is going to give us our experience, then we're reliant. We're always a victim to the outside world. And as soon as you start to see that's not true, like you were saying, there's like a pep in your step. There's a different kind of, like, you know, power that comes back in kind of recognizing that, oh, I'm not at the mercy of everything that's around me. I'm not at the mercy of the news. You know, right now it can seem like, you know, that I'm feeling bad or I'm feeling scared because of what's going on, and I know that that's not true. And so I see that all the time in the people that we work with. But then something big can happen like this, and I've noticed a few things online, you know, especially with people who, you know, have a criminal addiction, and it's I mean, there's drugs and alcohol as well, but it's so easy now, especially like losing a job or you know, at the moment there's a lot of people who are out of work because of the virus. It's so easy to get back into criminal addiction because it's like, well, I know this, like it's so easy. And so I'm curious, how would you speak to kind of having this emotional freedom, you know, how to how to frame the question, to speak to that, to people that are kind of struggling with kind of wanting to stay on a path that's really positive, but also kind of, you know, feeling a little bit adrift at the moment because there's a lot going on.
Okay, good. I need to just get these dogs out of here because they're not giving me much emotional freedom.
Okay.
I'm starting to focus on them instead of on this. So let me get them out of here.
Yeah, that's fine. He's like, no, not going.
So security is always in the moment, in the now, in what's real. It's inside of you in the moment. What we do when we start to think is we try to get emotional stability by thinking. Because we get tricked into thinking that whatever we're seeing or whatever we're thinking about is causing our bad feeling. So then we think about it because we're all trained to figure it out and take care of it or do something about it. And so we go into memory. So what's in memory is whatever you've done in the past. So that's why people tend to go back to what they did before, because that thought looks like a good idea. Like, oh yeah, I know that thought. That's home. That's familiar. There's some sense of security with that, which is interesting because usually it's coming from our insecurity. But it creates this illusion. It's kind of like asking Siri. To me, it's like thinking about stuff is like asking Siri to tell us how to live our life. And so it comes up with an answer. You know, like I can ask like, Siri, where can I get Italian food in Hilo? And they say, in Phoenix, Arizona, there is a restaurant at this address. Like, it just makes mistakes, right? So our little intellect just makes mistakes all the time. But when we don't know that, those thoughts come in and consciousness makes them seem real, and we go back to that old behavior. So, like, to me, we kind of live at different levels of consciousness. So when we're really insecure and you get involved in a lifestyle that's not healthy, whether it's an addiction or criminal behavior, or whatever it is, and that's just a level of consciousness, right? So you start feeling better, you get out because you think, right, when I get out of prison, man, I'm going to be great. And then you get out, and then all of a sudden, that thinking that things are going to be great doesn't pan out. So now you start thinking, oh, things are not great. And then you start going back down again, right? And then you're down to that old level that you used to live at. So what comes out of your thinking at that level is whatever you thought at that level. So whatever your deal is, that's what comes out, right? And like there was these three guys that got put in prison in Honolulu for robbing a bank, and they did 15 years. Okay, so they got out at the same time. They got a condo. They were living together for 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, they robbed the same bank in the same way, and they got caught again. Now, you know that for those 15 years, they were thinking about how that was really a good plan. And if it hadn't been for whatever, it would have worked. So they go back to that thinking, and it seems like a good idea. And that's just how we get tricked by our thinking. And we go back to things that, you know, like when you wake up and you're in a better state of mind, you're like, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? And then we start to think about that, like, oh, there must be something wrong. I must be, you know, a bad person. I must be like damaged. I must be something. And then that seems real because consciousness just takes whatever you think and makes it seem real. But if you remember, it's just Siri talking. Then you're like, oh, wait a minute now, is this really true or not? Like, you know, when Siri tells you to turn left in 500 feet and there's no road, you don't turn left. You go, oh yeah, that's not a good thought. Don't do that, right? So we have to do that with our own like intellect to see that when your state of mind drops down, all of a sudden that insecure thinking comes alive again, looks like a good idea. So when you start to see that that's what's happening, then when those thoughts come in, they don't look so good. They don't look so tempting. They don't look so accurate. At least that's how I see it. It doesn't look like that's something I want to do. You start to realize that everything you think you want to do, you don't really want to do.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm sure my husband sometimes thinks that he wants to be divorced from me. And now I don't like take that seriously because I know he's just having a reaction, right, to me telling him how to drive a car or whatever. And he'll like, I can't ever please you, and you should, this isn't working, we should get a divorce. And I'm like, I started laughing the last time. I started laughing, that just really made him mad too. But you know, it's kind of like we just get caught up in thought. We just get caught up in thought. That's all it is. And the more you see that's all it is, and you keep it simple, then seeing how thought works to take you back into your past or back into other behavior isn't like a moral deficit. mean, that's kind of what we used to think about alcoholics, right? Is that they were like morally corrupt, and that's why they couldn't stop drinking. And so people still think that about people with criminal behavior. It's like they're morally corrupt. Well, no one is morally corrupt. It's just our thinking gets corrupted quite a bit.
Yeah.
And sometimes we create this thinking because that's the best we can see to do. That's all we know. You know, it's like when you grow up at a given level of consciousness and you're surrounded by other people that are thinking like that, that looks like that's all there is. That's what we should be doing.
Yeah, looks normal.
Yeah. So waking up to that, like, oh my goodness, I don't have to be like that. That's hopeful. That's like, wow, if you could see that, man, the rest of your life takes on a totally different trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and I know for myself, because you know, when I get caught up and you know, even like that, what you were saying, you know, when I'm watching the news and I can have a thought that says turn this off, you know, because you start getting annoyed with the president, or you start getting annoyed with how stupidity in the world, or you start getting fearful about, you know, work or whatever, and I can, and in when you're feeling it, it feels so real, you know, especially when it's personal. I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to get through this? Am I going to be okay? But then, you know, something there inside me is just like, turn the television off and go and sit outside and watch the birds, you know. And then it's like, oh yeah, like you were saying, like back in the present moment of like, we'll get through this. Like, I know that there's something else. There's something that I see when you were saying that there's a good feeling. It's like, there's when my mind can settle, or when I'm not, you know, I'm chasing, you know, the feelings and getting caught up. It's like something settles, and then a thought, a better feeling comes from like, we'll get through this. Like, I know we'll get through it somehow. We'll be okay. And it doesn't come from here. It comes from somewhere else that kind of bubbles to the surface when I actually, you know, I'm just in like you were saying, in the present moment, or just kind of being, rather than thinking that I have to do something to make anything better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always like, you know, I'll tell you a story once. George Pransky helped me. My husband, I just gotten married a year before this. And my husband got a tumor in his thyroid. And I was fearful that it was cancerous. And I thought, oh, sure, I finally get somebody to marry me and they're going to die of cancer. And I was like, and I would think, like, oh, he can't have cancer because he would have lost weight. And then I'd get insecure. And then I'd think, oh, I don't know, he could really have cancer. Wouldn't that be awful? And then I get insecure. So I called George and I said, George, Sam's got this tumor on his throat and I'm driving myself nuts thinking about it, positive or negative. And he said to me, he said, Chris, get in that place of not knowing. You're safe there. Get in that place of not knowing. Because when we're not thinking about what's going to happen next, we're okay. And sometimes we just have to admit that we don't know. We don't know how bad this is going to get. We don't know how we're going to be affected. But throughout history, there have always been people who have gone through awful things and come out the other side, or we wouldn't be here. So how we do that and how much we get affected by it is a spiritual thing. It's not a physical world thing. It's a spiritual thing. So staying in that place and really listening for your wisdom and trusting that somehow you'll see what to do and you'll get through it frees you up. Because then you don't have to be thinking about what you have to prepare for. I mean, like that doesn't mean that part of that preparation wouldn't be preparing. I mean, you know, like I went out to Costco and got 6 months worth of food and made sure that we'd be okay for the long haul. But then I stopped thinking about it. I mean, I'll still eat the food whether we're quarantined or not, so it's no big deal. Yeah. So, you know, it's like, that's the thing about, you know, like sometimes we talk about wisdom, but the other just kind of different way of saying that is just use your common sense.
Mm.
Don't get freaked out, because when we get freaked out about anything, our thinking gets bad and we start making errors in judgment. We start making errors in thought as a way to find something that we already have.
Mm.
And by looking for it, by searching for it, by trying to figuring out how to get that security, we get lost in our insecurity.
I love that. I love that. Sitting in the not knowing is so true. It's just in that place of I'd call it like the place of curiosity, like not knowing and just being curious of like in any situation, in any I think, you know, as I think about starting the work that I'm doing or any of that, it was kind of coming from that place of I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to work out, and it doesn't matter, you know, because it's like I felt like I fired Anna, you know, when I actually fired myself from getting in the way of kind of getting in the weeds and trying to figure it out, and that she kind of, you know, got a back seat, or, you know, we gagged her.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, then you just realize actually it's so much easier in that place of just showing up and not knowing, and there is safety in that, it feels like, because you don't need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there's a comfort, I don't know, it feels comforting when you say that.
Yeah, there's just kind of that knowing that happens where you know that right here, right now, we're both fine.
Mm.
You know, like like I've got a couple of friends that actually have gotten the virus, and knowing this really helped them because they didn't freak out, and they actually kind of saved their immune system, I think, because they didn't like tax themselves with that. So no matter what's happening, it's still the answer. I mean, if you get it, or if your loved one gets it and they die from it, that might happen. But how you go through that and how you deal with that, that's the only thing you have control over.
Mm.
Life happens.
Ain't that the truth?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I think that's one of the most powerful things in the world, is to remember that you're okay. Your answers are coming from within you, and you're looking for common sense answers. Like sometimes people I see what they write online, and they're like so complicated, and I was like, I can't even understand what they're saying, let alone thinking that that's coming from wisdom. Just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep your life simple. Keep your thinking in enjoyment and what you've got, and gratitude, and that becomes such a great antidote for anything that's happening in your life, anything that's happened to you, or anything that you've done. You know, like that's what I always tell people, is that it doesn't matter what you've done to anybody else in your life. It doesn't matter what's been done to you, and it doesn't matter what the circumstances of your life are. That's all part of the outside world. The inside world cannot be damaged by any of that. Like, even though you feel like crap and you feel broken and you feel like you've been traumatized in whatever way, that's not, you're not stuck with that. That's just the response you're having to your thinking about what happened.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that bad things didn't happen, but how much it affects you and your freedom from them is in your own hands. It's in your own awareness, really.
That's really cool. That feels I know that feels complete to me. It feels like I'm just in a good feeling now. I've got nothing else going through my head. So I just I think that, you know, everything that you said has been so spot on. It's been really insightful, and I'm sure really helpful too.
Well, I hope it, you know, for me, it's like I can just talk about what I know and what's happened to me, and that just like knowing that I was okay in spite of what happened to me, in spite of what, you know, like that was huge, because I spent most of my career up in that point kind of getting behind being the victim of the world. You know, it's like that like championing the rights of victims and kind of moving in that direction was making me really stressed, because seeing that what happened to me was, you know, not good and was traumatic and all of that, but I wasn't stuck with that, and that was I was like too much of my mind was filled with that. I wanted to get that out of my life, not entertain it, not carry it with through time. And that's what freedom is, really. Freedom is not where you're living, you know, or how many rules you have to follow.
Yeah.
It's freedom from your own thinking.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. We've had many people realize, you know, find their say that I didn't know I'd come to prison to find my freedom.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's so cool to see too, when there's like, oh, everything can be going on out here, but nothing can affect what's going on in here but me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like right now, it's like, you know, like when I lived in Minnesota, we had a lot of tornadoes. And, you know, it's kind of like being in the eye of the tornado where everything around you is wreaking havoc. But if you go inside and you connect up with, well, you don't really connect up with it, well, you realize that you're the feeling you're looking for, that you are security, that you are contentment, that you are happiness, then you don't have to do anything to try to get it.
Yeah.
And it just settles you down.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was lovely. I'm feeling all settled down.
Great.
Yeah. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. This has been
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime you want anything, I'd be happy to help you with that. I'd be honored to do it.
Thanks. Thank you.